Greetings, everyone, my dear students, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for stopping by to this YouTube channel. My name is Meraj Kidwai, and you can find about me at vertexthesolution.com. I'm uploading this video lecture on creative writing asked by one of my viewer, and it was long to you. I'm so sorry about that. Um, I- but I am anyhow, trying to upload it on time for you. I hope this would be helpful. And also, you may please let us know if you need any other video topics or video lectures of any other topic that you're interested to study on. So we are more than there to help you out with any of your educational requirements there. So please let us know, as in our best capacities, we are there for you. So today I'm going to cover on creative writing here, basically. So what is creative writing? When we talk about writing skills, definitely. Now, writing skill in itself is a very refined topic, okay? It is a skill, it is a proficiency, it's a competence. Skill is something which you have an ability for, right? To do something, to do or complete a particular task. Okay. In the same way, we do have in language proficiency a classification of our proficiency of language termed as writing. And writing is a skill, it's an ability to express your thoughts, your ideas, or you would like to communicate. Now, if you go and watch the playlist, I'm sure there is a writing skill video where in detail I have explained on various forms and types, I believe, but I still, quickly go through all of it one more time, just as an introduction to creative writing for a more deeper understanding. Now, writing skill comprises of fictional and non-fictional forms, definitely in a very broader sense. So we can say that writing can be classified as fiction or non-fiction, right? Now, when we talk about non-fiction, we understand that, for example, writing a text message to your friend, okay, or an email, okay, a letter. Okay, so wherever the events are happening in the real life, or the real life events happening all together, we can say them as in the form of a non-fiction piece of writing. Or suppose there are other examples for a, let's say, a diary entry or journaling. Okay, so we can say these are non-fiction pieces of writing. Now, fiction is again comprises of poetry. Let's say poetry, okay, or novel or novella, right? So which have character, plot, right, and a fictional imagination or a imaginary story that you create and you express through a piece of literature or a piece of text, whether it's a poetry or a poem, or whether it's any kind of a short story, or it's a novel or a novella, etc. Depends. So that is, of course, falls under the category of fiction or fictional piece of writing. Now, what is creative writing? How we can understand creative writing? What defines creative writing? Now, creative writing, we can define creative writing as anything which is factual. We can say creative writing can also be factual. It can be informative, like any sort of information can fall under the category of non-fiction. It can be an imagination of the writer or the author. For example, a poem or a poetry. right? That can also be a form of creative writing, or plays or drama, for instance, okay, any kind of a literary work. So definitely that all comes under the category of creative writing. It can be factual, it can be informative, it can be imaginative, right? And definitely the way you communicate yourself, or basically the thoughts, or I would say your expressions, definitely talks about how you're able to, utilize the best vocabulary, tone, and structure of the content of the writing piece, and you're able to deliver it in terms of your fiction form or the non-fiction form. So this is how we classify, my dear children, students, this is how we classify creative writing basically. This is the basic introduction of creative writing. Let's see more into this. As I explained just now that there are different types of creative writing based on fiction and non-fiction, so we can understand what types or forms of creative writing we can see. So in terms of fiction, you must be well aware, as I've given various examples of novel, of poetry, or of short piece of writing, or a story, short story we can say, or a drama. That all comes under the category of fiction. So we can understand here that creative writing can also be a fictional form in terms of short stories, in terms of novels, in terms of novellas. Novellas are lengthier than the novels in comparison, so they are called as novellas. We have poetry. We can also say flash fiction. Okay, so flash fiction is also a piece of creative writing here. Now, definitely, we can also say, few more examples are like drama, for instance, okay, and poetry. Then we have many other forms in poetry. So definitely, these are some of the examples of, or I would say, forms of creative writing in the fiction category. Now, there is one more category which is called as creative non-fiction. Okay, there's another category under creative writing which is called as creative non-fiction. Here in creative non-fiction category, the real life events or personal experiences in terms of storytelling experiences or journaling, for example, or any piece of essays that we write comes under the category of non-fiction piece of writing. So we can say in creative non-fiction, the real life events, experiences, okay, through, we can say, storytelling. Then again, in storytelling, you have multiple events, then narrative or descriptive, what piece of writing it is. Then again, it goes further in the classification of it. But here, in general, I'm telling you that how creative nonfiction is classified and how it is defined. So it is defined that creative nonfiction has real life events and experiences, maybe through storytelling or personal experiences people can share. So some of the examples are, for example, essays, or you know um, even in journalism as well, right? So some piece of writing, literary journalism is a creative non-fiction form of creative writing, right? Or we can say so these are some of the forms of creative non-fiction. I hope this is clear to you here. Let's move on. One more thing I would like to continue here. Many of my students might not be aware about the flash fiction. So as I've given the example of flash fiction, what is it actually? So flash fiction is another example of creative writing where it's a very short form of storytelling. Typically in few hundred words you're telling about something, okay? And the writer create complete stories with a limited word count. Okay, so that is called a flash fiction. So we can say a very short form of storytelling. That is a flash fiction. I hope this clarifies to everyone. So let's move ahead now. Now, it's a very important point here to understand that when we develop any piece of literature, any piece of writing, any piece of text, definitely there is a context. Okay, so the context we can say or we can define it as about what you wish to write. So it's whether it's an human emotion, whether you're writing about an emotion. For example, it can be love, it can be justice, okay, or it can be let's say technology if it is non-fictional form, an essay on technology, or for example this is about understanding on educational topics, for example, any educational philosophy or psychology you're writing about. So the context of writing is very important to develop while developing any piece of text or a literature or any piece of any writing piece when you're developing. So the most important is context, and if context is with respect to emotion, then what kind of an emotion you're writing about. So definitely context is very important to develop. Next, and the most important thing is when you're developing, let's say, a short story, for instance, okay, or you're writing a novel, for instance, okay, so or even drama. So you need plot. You need to develop a plot on what you're writing. Okay. Plot is the series of events. What is a plot? Series of events that happens in your story, in your novel, or we can say the actions that make a narrative, okay, or create a narrative in your story or in the novel itself. The most important thing to remember here is the development of characters. So character is another most important element to develop for your short story or a novel if you're working on a fiction, for instance. So these are very important elements to remember. Now character is of course the individuals, or I would say the major elements that play around your story. Okay, for example, Romeo Juliet. Okay, in Romeo Juliet we can say Romeo and Juliet were two lovers. So these were the characters of Shakespeare's play. So they are very important. How you dress up those characters, the nature of those characters, right? What they're called, how they are viewed in the story. Are they the protagonist, or they are the villain of the story, of your story? They are, you know, driving the plot of the story towards the negative or towards the positive side. They're constructing the plot, or they're not able to construct the plot with their presence in your story. So this is how you evaluate and develop character, and those character requires emotions, and those each of those character requires, the I would say they should be interconnected with one another. That in your plot, if the characters are not connected well, whether they are working for the story, or whether they are against of the story or the ending, right? For instance, if there are negative characters in your story, so but they should be related with one another, unless your plot will be weakened. Okay, your plot will be quite weak in the story, and the approach, the method, by which you bind your audience, okay, that is very important. So if your plot is weak, and hence each and every element is interdependent on one another. The very first point, in the beginning, I've explained when I started explaining you on creative writing, is the context, or we can say the point of view as well. So point of view, where your storyline is going, how it should be perceived by your audience, how it should be viewed by your audience. It's very important to keep all these details in mind while developing a fictional form of creative writing. Then, of course, as I've also begin explaining it with an emotion, like for example, love, justice, technology. So, what theme you are writing on? So we can say theme is extremely important to develop. Is it romance? Okay, it's revenge. Okay, the theme can be political as well. You're writing a political essay, for example. So it depends, what kind of theme you choose to write on. So we'll come to the non-fiction form as well. Here I'm explaining you about the fiction where we are developing plot and character. Of course, when you're talking about either in fiction or non-fiction both, we definitely use a lot of literary devices. Now, we know that literary devices are n in number. That means they're infinite. There are so many literary devices, or we can say figures of speech in English literature. So there are different forms of literary devices, for example. That's again a very different topic. So if you are weak in your literary devices, you're not able to create much more expression in the way you convey your emotions, or the way you communicate or try to connect with your audience, right? So I would say literary devices or figures of speech are like the jewelry. Okay, it's the jewelry of like a woman who dresses up, okay, and she wears a necklace, or she wears an earring, for an example, to look more glamorous, to look more appealing to the audience. For example, if there's a stage performer, or for example, you're getting dressed up for a party, for instance, and the more she and definitely simplicity is again a jewel, and it definitely attracts people around. And simplicity is the a major part in the reflection of your writing as in human beings. So writing is, again, if you compare a human with the form of writing, that with the form of text that you're trying to develop in the form of writing, and you can create images around when you're trying to write. For example, just I have given example of a woman who's getting dressed up, for example, and wearing different types of jewelry, for example, to look more beautiful, more appealing. So that jewelry is just like an example of a figure of speech or a literary device in the form of writing that a woman wears and adores, and people then compliments that beautiful piece of jewelry she's wearing on her, and her beauty and her elegance and her grace, the way she dresses up. So, and she attracts the attention of the gathering. So just imagine when you're developing your plot, your character, your piece of writing, it's just another thing. You are dressing up your writing with all those beautiful ornaments, or I would say the elements that attracts the attention of the gathering, that is your audience, to connect with them. And definitely you may find people falling in love with your writing when they're able to connect with you. And that is the mannerism, that is the etiquette of your writing, and that is what the language, the most important part, in creative writing, is the usage of language, the vocabulary, okay, the words that you choose to define the emotion, the statement, for instance. Even if you're writing a non-fictional piece, and the way you are defining, for example, the atrocities happening on the weaker section, of the poor section of the society, and you're able to bind your reader, your audience, in the piece of text you're trying to convey, your emotion is reflected there. That is what a creative piece of writing is. It can be analytical as well. So there are various forms of creative writing here that we can talk about. So, for example, analytical piece of writing where you're analyzing data and charts, and how your analytical expertise is going in the piece of text you're developing here, with your expertise, with your suggestions, with your observations, the kind of language you're using, the professional tone, the structure of the language that you're building up, that piece of text, whether it's an essay, it's an article, or it's a fiction piece of writing or a non-fiction piece of writing, that doesn't matter what you're developing. But creative writing should able to bind the readers. So the most important element here to remember, that your readers should be mesmerized, whether it's fiction, whether it's non-fiction. So how you design your elements, how do you develop those elements, the figures of speech, metaphors, personification, imagery. There's so many figures of speech in English that you can choose to dress up your writing, and develop that plot, develop the characters, and work in context with the theme you're developing a particular piece of writing. So this is a short or I would say brief on creative writing. You can connect with me for more, if you would like a more elaborative uh, a lecture on creative writing, or else you may please let me know further where you get stuck. Develop some kind of text or some kind of piece of writing and send it to me for evaluation. I will help you out with that as much as I can. You can choose to email me at anniekidwai366@gmail.com. I hope this video is helpful for you as a lecture, and let me know further where I can help you. Thank you very much for watching, and wish you all the luck.